So, Brent, thanks so much for coming.
You are welcome.
Appreciate it. Our first guest of 2017, and probably our best. I've looked at the list, and it's going downhill from here.
Best so far this year.
Yeah, best so far this year, actually. Good, that's good. No more jokes from you, Brent, please. Only from me. So why don't we start, actually, with what you do. Kind of tell us about your business and your focus right now, and then we'll kind of, like I said, we'll reverse engineer it and kind of walk through the journey. But why don't you tell everybody here that doesn't know what you're up to right now?
Okay. So I have a marketing and sales consulting practice. I don't have employees. I did. Could be one of the stories we tell later. But I operate independently. So I get hired by owner-managed companies when they're usually in one of three scenarios. They're launching a new product, or they're getting into a new market, or something in the competitive landscape has changed. Sometimes there's been a technology change, or you know, some competitors come to town, or something like that, and the old sales and marketing strategy just isn't going to work. So that's the short summary for you.
So I mean, obviously that's fairly specialized and that's fairly focused in terms of a business. You're kind of focusing on that kind of a market, those kind of clients. Were you always able to be that specialized in the sense of focusing on just those three?
Okay, so yes, I'm doing the exact same thing I did on day one 20 years ago. So started in 1997, but my clients are a little bit different. My first client was a photographer working out of his basement, and a wonderful guy, and absolutely was happy to help him. But the nature of the marketing plan was a little bit more straightforward than some of the clients I work with now. So to paint a picture for what I do, so let's put two categories. There's strategic marketing, and then there's Salesforce management. So if people with my background might be brand managers for Procter & Gamble. So they would be making decisions around the price of the product characteristics, pick the target market, what distribution channel. They would do all the prep work behind the desired reputation or brand for the product, and how it's going to be promoted. Then the ad agency's hired. So I don't do any creative work. I don't do any of the ad development work. I do all the background before the suppliers, the ad agencies come in. And on the sales management side, I'll help set territories and commission structures, decide whether they're inside or outside sales reps, the types of positions, characteristics that are going to be needed for those positions, you know, whether there's a VP of sales or operational manager, technical sales, that kind of thing. So there's a wide variety of topics, I guess, that I get drawn in, and sometimes people need me to prepare a broad, comprehensive plan, and sometimes we just delve into one issue, like someone needs to set a price for a product. Most of the clients I work with now are pretty established owner-managed businesses. They've been around a few decades. The average client I work with probably has about, I don't know, $10 to $40 million in revenue. Some of them are bigger, 100 million. Some of them are smaller. They're startup or smaller businesses, and they just need a soundboard. So in that case, I might sit down with them for half a day or a few hours and help them through a little bit of a simpler process. But that's a little bit more of a deeper dive into some of the nature of it. It's evolved. When I started, there was the smaller businesses that needed something a little bit more simpler, and then slowly over 2 decades, you just kind of round your skill set out, and you start working with a little bit more complex situations.
So have you, in your business then, kind of built some strategic alliances with people that can kind of fill the gaps a bit more. So you said you don't do the creative. So
Yeah.
at this point, are you coming in saying you need creative and here's somebody that could do it for you? Or do
so
you
here's an example for you. So there's an insurance broker in town that I was working with, and very established multi-generational business. They know what they're doing. They absolutely know what they're doing. There was no crisis there, but together I interviewed some of their customers, and then we got a feel for what customers needed that wasn't being provided in the market, and then we stepped back and we said, what does that really mean for the sales process and for the advertising and promotion process? So we made some decisions on what changes would happen to the way they promoted and what the messages would be, and then that got handed off to an ad agency. And in their case, they didn't have an ad agency, so I recommended a couple that I knew could do the work, and they picked who they want to work with, and they run with the creative piece. But see, the thing to understand is when you look at the larger companies in North America, like Procter & Gamble, they don't do their own ad creative. They've got strategy people that prep, and then the ad agency comes in and you give them a path to work with, and the creative people do phenomenal work when you just give them a little direction. You know, and the problem in the entrepreneurial community is that the entrepreneurs don't know what decisions to make, and so they go to the ad agency, and the ad agency, you know, tries their best to work with a lack of direction, and so you get mixed results. And so that's basically, you know, a simple way to kind of illustrate the role that I play before some of the suppliers get involved.
So what's your favorite part of the process now? Is it the digging in, meeting with the customers? Because, I mean, every business has their own speak, and that's, I think, in terms of the creative advertising marketing, it's hard to sometimes get out of your own head, like saying words that you guys use all the time. So I imagine meeting with the customers is interesting, learning how they see and what they think. Or is it the planning? Is it the... What's your favorite?
There's two parts. Meeting with the customers, with my clients, is good. Meeting with their customers is better. I really, really, really enjoy usually I'm doing qualitative research. So I might meet with, say, a dozen of my clients' customers, and like I do a lot of work in business to business and industrial work. So they might be my client might be a manufacturer that sells to mines. So I'll interview a dozen of their clients, from Meadow Lake mechanical pulp and from the mines themselves, like maybe Areva, and it might be a different customer, like I don't know, a gearbox remanufacturing company in Midwest US or something like that, and learn what my get information we don't know right now that we can use to make some decisions around. That's fun. That, to me, that's a discovery step that it's like you walk into a room, the lights are out and the books are all pulled off the shelves on the floor, and you gotta find out what's in the room and where it goes, and that's interesting to me, because like usually they're not quick interview. There might be an hour. I might be on the phone with the director of procurement for a mining company for an hour, and you learn things that most people don't know. And then the second part I love is solving the Rubik's Cube. So once you get that information, you got to figure out what to do with it. And like, you know, I've used this example. A couple of you have heard me say it before, but you know, marketing and sales strategy is a lot like solving a puzzle, and a Rubik's Cube's a good example because you move one side and three others shift on you. So if you're setting a price, you know, the brand strategy is going to change because price impacts the perception of the product. If you move premium to a parity and equal price, well, that impacts the way that you're perceived. Or if you choose to distribute your product through different dealers, it's absolutely going to impact possibly your pricing or your margin stack. So all these are integrated, and that's kind of fun for me, is to try to help solve that puzzle and figure out how to pull it together.
I have never finished a Rubik's Cube in my life. Have you? Like an actual Rubik's Cube?
I haven't, but my 9-year-old son's really close.
Yeah. I struggle. My boys bring it to me, I'm like, oh, there's almost nothing on earth besides my mother-in-law that makes me feel dumber. Mother-in-law, come on, you guys.
I got to stay away from that.
Yeah, I know. They're all like, all the mother-in-laws there, like, you leave your mother-in-law out of these Rubik's Cube jokes. Yeah. So why don't we talk about where you came from then? So 97, you started your business, but are you born and raised in Saskatoon?
Yeah, Saskatoon kid here. So I had a strange university career. I dropped out of 2 colleges before I got to business. And
which one? So now I'm curious.
So I graduated from high school wanting to go into education. And I had an 83.5 average and you needed an 84. So they said no. So I missed it. So I went into arts and transferred to education. And the best thing that possibly could have happened was I went student teaching for 2 weeks. And that really sucked. I really did not like that at all. I realized I was in the wrong college. So really just, I guess, dropped out of 1. I was in 2 colleges, but dropped out of, and then 2 years off and just sort of roamed, worked in the hospitality industry and went to a couple countries. And then came into the College of Commerce here at the time, School of Business now. And my schedule was awkward because I had all these other credits. So I had a partial year and I wrestled for U of S. So by the time I got to 4th year, basically I had 3 classes to do. So I worked full time for a video production company in town, doing marketing and sales for them. And so in the course of that year, where I was finishing my degree and working full time, really got to know the business community well enough as you can in 1 year to know that no one had a marketing plan at all. No one, and if they said they did, it's in their head. They don't really have one. And so I thought, well, I can do this. And so left on very good terms from the entrepreneur I was working with and started up my business. And I absolutely had the background and skill set to help them and do the work. I just had no idea how to run a consulting company. And I didn't know, of course. So that was a bit of a learning curve. But that's how I got into consulting, was to say, I see that need, I think I can do this, and I jumped on it then.
Your ears don't look like you wrestled.
No cauliflower.
Yeah,
no,
exactly.
No,
what weight class were you in?
What was I, 72 kilos.
Oh, we're exactly the same, basically.
Maybe back then.
Yeah, in like grade 8, I was 72 kilos. Thanks to old Dutch chips. Anyway, so you're now going to start your own business. You're working for another entrepreneur, which is you're probably learning lots of interesting things, because that'd be an interesting market. So you become an entrepreneur. How easy was that to transition? Because were you paying rent? Did you have a mortgage? Did you have a family? Like, was that a big jump, or?
Well, so I remember thinking, I don't have kids. I'm not married. I'm going to pay all my bills. No matter what I commit to, I'm going to pay it. But you know what? If I go bankrupt, it really doesn't matter. Yeah. And that was a thought that was in my head. So my dad was a maintenance mechanic at Intercon, and my mom a social worker. So I didn't come from a business family. But I won't name the bar, but I worked in a bar here in Saskatoon in those 2 years off. And I said, if these guys can run a business, I think I can do it too. Yeah. That was my deep analysis. I didn't realize how hard it was, and I didn't know what I didn't know.
Do you think that was a bit of a saving grace, though? Not like, is there success in that ignorance?
There's, naivety's bliss. You know, I had no idea what I was in for, really. I have a good work ethic, and I pulled it together for sure. But bottom line, in the first year, I didn't pay myself a salary, and I brought in enough revenue to pay all my expenses. Didn't take a dime at all personally. Second year, made enough money to pay myself what my peers that had graduated were earning, and then in year 3 was a little bit better. And certainly have had some ups and downs in the 20-year period. But like 3 years to get going is 3 years to get going. You hear it, and you know it's not right all the time, but that was absolutely the situation for me. And when I jumped in, I said, well, like I'd interviewed with some of the multinationals that needed strategic marketing employees. There were no strategic marketing jobs in Saskatchewan. I didn't want to leave. So I'm not moving to Toronto. And really, I didn't have any other options. I knew that there was a gap in the Saskatchewan marketplace. So I said, I'm going to give this a shot. And as it turns out, I loved it. And you know, I get along well with entrepreneurs. So I fit well in the market.
It's interesting that you say you didn't want to leave, because that 97 was kind of right in the heyday of people leaving. So, and you didn't have a family.
No, my wife, we were dating, I guess.
Okay.
We were together. We weren't engaged.
So is that the reason you didn't leave?
No.
Did she save us?
Neither one of us wanted to leave. We talked.
Was it just internal? Like what was the draw for Saskatoon? Because in '97 there wasn't a ton going on.
No, but like my wife. So at the time, my wife and I talked about, like, how old was I? I was 24, I guess. And we said, well, what are we going to do? Are we going to get married? Yeah, we're going to get married. Where do you want to live? Well, we both like it here. We don't want to leave. What can we do for careers? And it wasn't, like, not to overstate it. I like Saskatchewan. It's good. I want to live here. We both want to live here, and we decided to stay. It was not that complex. Interestingly, though, just to paint a picture of a person's career coming from Saskatchewan, my wife, so she finished an undergrad in human physiology here, and then she had an opportunity. She got accepted to do a biomedical engineering master's degree in Dalhousie. That was year 3. And we said, okay, well, what are we going to do? Well, like, my wife, she likes lab bench science. So we said, okay, well, do it. So I commuted for 2 years. No, I commuted for 1 year. That was year 4 of my business. So every month I flew between Halifax and Saskatoon. And I spent 3 weeks in Halifax and 1 week in Saskatoon. And that wasn't fun. Yeah. We didn't like it. It was hard on us. And so that was the first year. And then the second year, put marriage first and said, well, let's see what I can do in Halifax for a year. And then we'll figure out when she's done her degree if we're going to come back. So I taught at St. Francis Xavier University, advertising, marketing management, and sales, essentially what I consult on. And I did that for a year, and it was wonderful. I didn't like College of Education because I'm not a babysitter. I didn't like that. But at university, really liked teaching. Not as a career, but sort of as just a taste of something different. And you learn your craft when you have to teach it. And then when that was done, my wife got accepted to do a master's or a PhD in surgery at Edmonton at U of A. So we moved to Edmonton for 4 years, and I basically lived in Saskatoon and Edmonton at the same time for 4 years. And then when that was done, we said, this is enough. We got to get back to Saskatoon. So we moved back. So, that was, I don't know, what was that? 2002? Yeah, about that. Yeah, right before the housing market, by the way, took off. Yeah, so we got lucky.
So, I mean, there's so much in that part that I want to kind of unpack a bit. First of all, you must be incredible at marketing and sales to just walk into Xavier and say, I'd like to teach, and they just let you teach. That's incredible. So, I mean, you're moving around, but kind of fluffed over that when you're in out east, you were year 4 now of your business. So first 3 years you were here, right? Yeah. 4th year now you're traveling. Yeah. How is that for running a business and being distant, but also being a teacher, because that's going to take some brain space.
So for that period of time that I taught, I did one consulting project, but I didn't really consult. I put my business on hold. Doing work from a distance really wasn't a problem because I do long-term strategic planning. I was here once a month. I mean, it really was not hard to do. The tough part was family when we were traveling. That was hard. The business was not hard to do. And I've got, like, after that, we didn't get into it yet, but I had a period where I was doing a lot of work outside of Saskatchewan, in the States and in several provinces. A lot of work. And so my wife, after we moved back, then we said, well, we're going to have kids. And I was in Washington State with a client, and we talked about what was left in the project, and so came back, and I went to the doctor appointment with my wife, and we said, so what's the last trip I can take? What's the last week so I'm here for my first child's birth? And she said, okay, 6 weeks out. Okay. So booked the last trip for this project in Washington State, 7 weeks out. And it was a Sunday, and we were ready to go, and my wife went into labor. Of course. And so obviously I didn't go on the trip. But, you know, huge wake-up call for us, because I don't know if you ever tried to fly from Seattle. Yeah. Like, it's not a direct flight, and there's no way at all I would have made it. Yeah. And baby was fine, premature, but absolutely fine. But that was a bit of a wake-up call, and so I stopped. I don't think I had a client for 4 years outside of Saskatchewan. I just stopped doing work outside of Saskatchewan. And that was a fork in the road where my wife and I said, this isn't going to work for us. One option would be to shut down the consulting business and find something else to do. Another would be to only consult here. And so that was Luke's 9. So that was I guess 9 years ago. And about 3 years ago we agreed it was about time for me to start doing some work outside of the province again, but not a lot of travel. I travel once every few months, that's it.
So, I mean, things always stick with you when you have some guests, and I've brought it up a few times, but I remember Greg Sutton talked about one of his big life things was how like in Asia, in the Asian cultures, they're very cyclical. They're not like a dead line, whereas in North America, that's why the flyers work. Oh my gosh, this VCR is on sale. I got to get it right now because it's never coming back. Where VCR, I guess, back in '97, recording Pearl Jam on David Letterman. Press record. Anyway, VCR, good point. So now I forget where I was going with that. So anyway, that's where I was going. So you decided as your family to 2 times to basically put your business on hold. The fear that lots of entrepreneurs would have with that is that, my gosh, if I go out east now and I just don't really have much going on in Saskatoon, they're going to forget about me, or I got to start all over. And then the same happened when you started doing work in the States. How did you navigate through that process of you're leaving a business, but not forever, because you're thinking you'll probably bring it back? Was there any lessons you learned in that? Was there some stresses? Was it harder than it sounded?
Well, you know, life's about trade-offs, right? And absolutely, I was willing to say the business might not work if we leave. But the business was my consulting practice. We haven't talked about when I had employees yet, but at the first time when we went to Nova Scotia first, I really like what I do, and I didn't want to change. But I like being married too.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I love my wife, and I don't want to lose my marriage, but keep my consulting practice. So it wasn't that hard of a decision. It was just one of those forks in the road that you take.
Was it, so in terms of I mean, I absolutely respect that, and it's great to hear a businessman say that. But in terms of the business, not the family part, was it hard then to come back, or like did it feel like you were starting all over? Like,
no,
because there's a bit of a brand.
Because when I was gone, I still did work here. Okay. It was easy. I mean, I came back. I remember Spencer Early from Early's Farm and Garden. When I moved back from Edmonton, so moving from Nova Scotia to Edmonton is one thing, but when I moved back from Edmonton to Saskatoon, he didn't know I lived in Edmonton.
Yeah, he didn't even know.
No idea. He wasn't a client, but he had no idea that I didn't actually live here, because I commute, you know, once every week usually, sometimes once every 2 weeks. Like I said, the travel was really hard on our life, but you know, the business was pretty easy to work.
So how did you get into the States? Like how are you diversifying now from traveling, getting your business back going full time in Saskatoon, and now you're gonna, like, you can't just get a phone call from someone in the States. Like, are you fishing down there for work, or how did it?
Well, you know, it's like most businesses work on relationships, almost all. But in professional services, you know, the sales and marketing process is it's centralized around, you know, layers. So awareness, and then understanding of what you do, and then some level of trust and familiarity with you, whether they actually know you or not, that they feel connected. The work I got all came from referrals and from relationships, people I might have met, or you know, doing work for one client and I get introduced to another. And then, you know, here's a good story for you, just because we've been talking kind of dry stuff, and this is different. So there's There's a client in town. He's passed away now. Neil Wagner. Has anyone here ever met Neil? A farmer. Crazy guy. He typical entrepreneur, because he said, well, I think I can grow crops, but I want to do something else. So he'd come up with really interesting products. He'd set up this out by Hague. He set up these processing facilities. One of his products was burn biodiesel, and Neil and I are meeting, and we're doing a marketing and sales plan for him, and we're talking. And so Neil, so what does the product do? Well, it's an additive. You put it in your diesel tank, and it's got these benefits. So who's the target market? Hillbillies. Okay, like Jeb Clampett? No, like real hillbillies, the kind of like the stereotype you think of when I say hillbilly. Okay, well, how do we get these hillbillies? And it wasn't in Saskatchewan, this was North America. NASCAR. Okay, so what do you mean NASCAR? Well, we got to sponsor a NASCAR car. Well, no, you don't. Like, that's a stupid idea. Do you know what that's, like that's FedEx? You're competing with these like interstate batteries. And he said, no, all these guys, all these hillbillies, they love going to these races. And he's sold. So anyway, we're working on the plan, and then he calls up Joe Gibbs Racing. Does anyone, there's probably race fans here. Do you guys know Joe Gibbs Racing?
Well, yeah, on football, Joe Gibbs.
Okay, yeah, well,
Joe Gibbs, and he had his team.
Joe Gibbs came from the football world, but he owns this racing team, right? And so he's legendary in sports from he had the credibility from Redskins, from Redskins, but then he sets up this team. And so he was the guy that owned Home Depot car, Tony Stewart, and owned FedEx car. And so anyway, now I never did work for Joe Gibbs Racing, but I had a client that was in North Carolina. And so, as it turns out, Neil was wanting to sponsor, and he'd called Joe Gibbs Racing, and they were actually interested in connecting with him and helping to sell his product through consumer retail network. So I offered, well, I'm going to be in North Carolina anyway. Let me meet with these guys. And I don't know if you know anything about this. This is interesting and big business. The business, I think, is valued somewhere around 250 million for Joe Gibbs Racing, but they've got a lot of money tied up. And so I show up for this meeting, and they go through the race shop, and there's like 8 Home Depot cars. I had no idea that they ship like 2 or 3 to a race, and then they race them, and then they have to bring them back and refurbish them, so the next ones are going to the next race. It was really interesting to go through that whole process. And then through the connection with Joe Gibbs Racing, then I got introduced into some different other entrepreneurs in the American market, and some of them did not end up being clients, but it's those types of connections that lead to more work. The one interesting story I'll tell you about Joe Gibbs Racing real quick. I don't know if this is actually public, or true even. But the guy from Joe Gibbs Racing was touring me around, and I said, this is interesting. How do you actually land a sponsor like Home Depot or FedEx? And he says, well, I don't know if this is genuine, but we were negotiating with, he was telling the story, he was negotiating with FedEx about getting the sponsorship. And apparently there's a few teams that were interested in getting this FedEx as a sponsor. And it didn't all come down to money. And there was one that was selected, and this is in 2006, so you didn't sign a contract and scan it. You actually sent it. So the contracts are being sent back and forth. And this race team signed the contract, and yeah, you can think where this is going, and they sent it by UPS to FedEx. So FedEx said, we're not partnering with these guys, and they backed away, and then they apparently they went to their number 2, which was Joe Gibbs. So then Joe Gibbs got the FedEx sponsorship. Again, I mean, I'm not part of that, but you hear these kind of things as you nestle into a company's business. So there you go.
So how did you get to the point then when, let's get to the employee part. So then you're growing your consulting business. You guys have reestablished here in Saskatoon. Where did the employee
So I was still in Alberta.
Okay.
I was still in Alberta, and my wife and I said, well, we want to end up in Saskatoon. Most of my clients were in Saskatoon, some were in Alberta and other places. And I said, well, I'm going to scale up now because we've got some stability. We know we're going to do this. So I decide I'm going to start hiring staff. And I want to be very clear. I was lucky because I did not have much competition. There was not a better job for someone straight out of university to have that was interested, had some competency in strategic marketing, that could do the kind of work that we were doing at the time. So, I mean, it's not that I had people directly out of university that were setting prices and setting up the distribution network and dealing with the branding work, but they were involved in those processes. And the learning curve, it's just like an accounting firm where you can get into a good firm and you're going to see things and you're going to learn from those clients. It's just a hockey stick curve. The education you're going to get, the level of competency goes up quick. And so I was fortunate where I had some really, really good people. The problem was that people with my background tend to gravitate to really big companies. So they like my best employees quit after a couple of years and are working, in the strategy department for Cameco, working for U of S, working for Federated Co-op. Okay. They went to the larger employers in Saskatchewan. And in an accounting firm, you have a 10-to-1 ratio roughly. So you're going to have 10 people join a firm, and there might be one at the end of the day that sticks around for their career. And that's part of the process. Like you're gonna work these young people hard. They're gonna learn a lot, and they're gonna move off into industry. But you got to have scale to be able to keep the people that are the good fit long term. And like I had 5 staff at my max, and the math didn't work. I just wasn't retaining. So there was also in 2000, what was it? Can't quite remember, 2009 maybe, 8 or 9, I said, I'm going to let my staff go. There was some soft economy that was going on as well. And I let my staff go, but my revenue stayed the same. So this is an important lesson I learned was I loved having staff, and they were really good people. I was fortunate. But the economics of the business model didn't work because they weren't staying around long enough to really become senior enough to bill out on their own. Like, I don't need someone to type up my notes. Mm-hmm. I need someone to help do the heavy lifting, and there's only so much that really was being done without a senior level person there. And I had some people that stayed up to 5 years, and they did really good work, but then they left. Mm-hmm. So I let my staff go. My revenue stayed the same. My cost structure
all at the
changed.
same time?
Yeah. Okay. I just said. And I did, and I went out to my network and said, here are the people who have been working for me. Does anyone need someone with this background? And I don't know if they needed my help or not, because they certainly found good positions, all of them, even the receptionist I had. But it was the structural change. I knew that the business model just wasn't working. And so, again, that what am I going to do conversation. Well, I knew it was going to work without the overhead. And so it's a different model. Certainly, like everyone's career, I'm not getting everything out of my career right now I'd love, because I don't think inherently I'm a lone wolf. But if I want to stay in Saskatchewan, and which my wife and I do, and I want to run this consulting practice, which I love doing, I love the work with the clients, and financially it works out right now. So it's the right choice. It's the right model for us.
So you're changing your model, you're saving substantial costs in doing that. Your revenue staying the same. Are you still in terms of your business structure now? Is it a home-based business, or
no? No. When I first started, I worked out of my home for about a month and a half, I couldn't handle it. I couldn't separate. I was working too much. Yeah. And so ever since then, I've rented office space, sometimes with always shared space with other professionals, or right now I'm sharing, I'm subleasing some space from a client that's a home builder. But working from home just doesn't work with the way that my business is structured.
So, I mean, there's probably people that are interested, because this is your bread and butter. So when you say a sales, marketing, strategic plan, that's, to you, you know exactly what you're talking about. But what does that mean to a customer? What value is that bringing to a customer? Or what do you hope the outcome of a good sales and marketing plan is? Is it making more money?
It's really hard to track, Evan.
Best kind of business to have is one no one can track.
I wish I could. The best I can give you is some examples. So the reason it's hard to track is because I deal with structural issues. Like if I work with someone and we say, we need to adjust the brand because customers want to buy convenience, and you're telling them that you've got the best quality, and the real market opportunity is convenience. Well, you know, that's a little bit cut and dry, but how do you measure that? You know, you can look at revenue over a course of time, over the next 5 years, but there's a lot that needs to happen for the revenue to increase and for the business to handle that well. So I'm putting the structural pieces together. And by the way, I don't just throw a plan on the table and say, here's what you should do. I'm helping the entrepreneur to decide what to do with their business. So if they choose to make the change, you know, then there's a lot of other pieces. Like maybe they need to change their operations, and they need to do some other changes. The best thing I can do is give you some examples of impacts I've had, some of the work I've had. One of my clients just recently, about 6 months ago, he called me up after we finished working on a project. He was all excited. He said, because we just finished doing a Salesforce management plan. He's got it's a $30 million business, and he had basically, actually this came up quite a bit in the last couple of years. A lot of companies, their sales people, their sales structure is completely dysfunctional, because for the last 8 years we've just had to pick up the phone.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so all these outside salespeople became inside salespeople. And yeah, some people got lazy. Some of them left, and they were replaced by people with an inside sales. Inside sales broadly refers to people that are accepting phone calls and not just taking orders, but handling customers that way. Outside sales, let's just give it a different term, they're out trying to get new business or knocking on doors, just for simple terminology. And so a lot of the work I've done in the last 2 years has been helping companies to restructure towards actually going out to get business. Well, this was one. This person he had an office in Ontario and one in Saskatchewan, and we did some work on this, and he called me up. He said, okay, you told me that for us to be able to land work with this market we were looking at, they were going to buy for these reasons, and we had to explain these steps and what made us unique in these ways. And he said, so I just got a verbal order, haven't got the contract yet, but just got a verbal okay from a sales meeting with these guys. They're gonna start bringing all their work to us, and that's worth $2 million a year in sales. So, you know, for a $30 million business, a $2 million new client was directly connected to this approach that we decided to take, and that was a very tangible result. But I got to be clear. I mean, it's not always that black and white. And another one, there was a I'll say a development company that had a pricing decision to make, and it was a very unique way that they had to structure the price, and we made some changes, and it added $1 million of profit to that project. And you know, that was a 3-hour meeting where we just sat down and tried to figure out what we could do to approach this pricing structure differently. So it's, I don't want to overstate this, but rarely, but occasionally, sometimes you can get a tangible piece of evidence, and sometimes you can't.
It's interesting, especially because the difference that makes a successful business and an unsuccessful business often is subtle. And then, like, as subtle as you were saying in 2008, outside salespeople became inside salespeople. And I mean, in my industry, that's exactly what happened. People were building so much, you just had to answer the phone and get the lumber there, or the quality cabinets at a fair price when they needed it. But what the thing about that change is you were probably paying those salespeople like outside salespeople, not just in terms of their salary, but outside sales guys. It's usually some kind of a commission structure, right? So now all of a sudden you're paying these inside salespeople the outside salespeople price. You realize you have a problem, so you want to get an outside salesperson, but then you're going, how do I split up the commissions now, because they're going to send, like, it's.
So you want some advice right now?
No, I'm not, yeah, actually, please. That's,
okay. Yeah.
No, I'm saying it's the subtleties of that stuff that I can see a plan really kind of nailing and giving some clarity to. And
yeah, there's always nuances that you don't grasp. So sometimes I'll sit down and it's a 3-hour discussion and we'll work through a single issue, but many times the clients I work with, it's a 3-month process. I'll sit down with a bunch of their customers and we don't figure it out right away. And in every single one of those coordinated plans, those larger projects, every single one, there's a small handful of decisions that are important. Not that some of them are unimportant, but some of them are crucial. And basically, for example, this other company that had the sales message wrong, or we had an idea for what might, we together came up with this idea of what might resonate. It was absolutely true. They just hadn't been saying it. So it was more than just a slick little statement. It was a characteristic of their business that they didn't realize, customers didn't understand. But we didn't get that until probably halfway through, I don't know, month 2. And then we just kind of looked at each other and said, that's it. You know, and so I liked what you just said, where there's difficult, it's more than just pulling out a template to say this is how you run a sales force, or this is how you price a product, or this is how you distribute a product. There's subtleties that you need to wrap your head around in that process. It takes a deep dive.
So where do you see your business going in the future, or where do you see Saskatchewan and Saskatoon? Like, is your business mostly retainer business?
No, the opposite.
It is?
I'm always irrelevant when I finish a project, because I deal with really difficult and awkward situations that my clients can't handle. So I mean, like one of my first clients, I worked with him in '97, and then 2000, and then 2008, and then 2013. So at different points, there's a need for what I do, and so I work with about 24 clients a year. About half of them I've worked with before, about half are new, and some of them, I meet for a few hours, and some of them are much larger scope of work. It varies. I do different things for different people, but I am always dealing with projects where I wrap something up and have to move on. That's a fault in what I do, in my own structure, because I don't have the consistent revenue. It's project-based, but I can't get around it, because at the end of the day, if I worked for a multinational, there would be a role for me to jump into different parts of the business from time to time. And I'm not built to, babysit Tide over the next 5 years or something like that. I need something new all the time. It's just the way I am.
So you're not being on a retainer. Obviously, there's some ups and downs with your income. How have you kind of managed that, especially with a family?
Okay, so interestingly, so I started in '97 when everyone was leaving the province, and the demand was really low for what I do when you left. And then I had, some ups and I was gone and back and ups and downs from about 2006 on. It started getting really busy. And there was about 8 years, of course, where our economy was just firing on all cylinders. People know this. We can get into the reasons why on that, but let's just leave that for now. And then there was 2 years of the doldrums. Now, I get hired when companies are growing. Now, you'd think that it would make sense to adjust your sales force before your salespeople are irrelevant. But that wasn't what happened. A lot of entrepreneurs said, I'm going to white knuckle it, I'm going to cut all the costs I can, and I'm not going to plan ahead until I can see where we're going to end up. So I had a really hard, about year and a half, where things were, my clients were exporting from the province. I dealt with a lot of clients that were exporting, some that were based out of Saskatchewan. But I also used that time to write a book. And this is, we're going to give this away as a, yeah, and we're going to give that away as a draw for the business card draw. But I took some time and I packaged some of the lessons that I'd learned from working with clients into that book. So about 200 clients I've worked with in the last 20 years, and so there's information on pricing and branding and Salesforce management and all these other issues, understanding your customer. And that was wonderful for me because it brought some other revenue, that's fine, but it also informed people about some of the issues I worked on. And so I'd get some sporadic work from people that were exposed to some of the things I could help with. But then something interesting happened in August, about the second week in August. And my phone started ringing, and it was because the business community had some visibility in what was going on in the economy. They felt that there would be some stability from this point forward. And I've had the busiest 5 months in my 20 years have been the last 5 months. Really? The most work I've had in the door. And I'm grateful for it, very much so. But to be very clear, as a cue to the economy, it's not that my clients think that the economy's taking off, it's that they've got a level of confidence that they understand what's coming and they're planning ahead now. So yes, I have some ups and downs. I've tried to supplement that with publishing, and I've certainly enjoyed it, and I've done some workshops around the book, and the training has been good. But at the end of the day, I'm dependent on the entrepreneur's desire to prepare for growth. That is just a natural attribute to how my business is structured.
It's an interesting transition because for a long time, and I'll use myself as an example, it was easy to lead in an economy that was booming. Like it would you basically just had to make sure you had enough people to get stuff out the door, and then all of a sudden in the last year and a half, two, is when you start learning how bad of a leader you were and where your weaknesses were. You navigate through that, I think, and I think the ones that survive do. And then now we're at this point where it feels like the economy has leveled off in sense it's not doing what it did and it's not going up like it did. But now you've made some changes to survive, because most businesses, if you're going to make it through the last few years, you've made some substantial changes and planning ahead now. Is that where you see Saskatchewan going and Saskatoon going now? Like, yeah. Are we going to be at this par place, or is there going to be some growth?
Everything I see says very slow growth. Not stagnation, that's the wrong word, that's the wrong tone, but slow growth. And I can't read a crystal ball, but here's really what I've seen. So I don't know, it changes every year, but maybe half of my clients are industrial business to business, So I've got some understanding of really the mines. The reason for 8 years our economy grew was because of the capital expansions. And so that's obvious to many people, but what they don't grasp is it's like the economy's like a balloon, and when you put air in it, it grows. And what's the air? The air is the capital that flows in for investment. And you know, it's fine for new fab to build a new manufacturing facility. That's wonderful for our city. But when a mine decides to spend $1 billion and maybe a third of it gets spent on suppliers in Saskatchewan, that's a really big deal.
Yeah, absolutely.
And when all the mines expand at the same time, all the potash mines, I'm speaking like a Toronto guy.
Yeah.
Got to change that. Potash. When BHP and Potash Corp were in their war, and you talk to people from out of the province that had never heard of the word potash and speak the word, they try to say potash. Potash. It was like 2 syllables, 2 separate words. Anyway, when all the potash.
It was a university dorm.
Well, I don't get that.
Come on, Brent. Yeah, because you're a good person, you don't get that. The people in the crowd that got it, she's like pot and hash. Anyway.
Okay, sorry, man. We're on different
totally. I'm on
realms here.
Yeah, you're smart, and I'm the host. That's how it works here.
Anyway,
good.
Back to the economy point. Yeah, so we had in the 70s the potash mines grew, expanded, and then we just recently saw an expansion. And what will happen? There's still some more that might happen. I have absolutely no inside information at all. So don't read into it. It's just who knows if they're going to go ahead. And you know, Cameco, wonderful company, but a lot of layoffs that have been going on, and Areva's having a tough time. Simply, it's got to do with the pricing of commodities. It's not rocket science. When the prices are down, they cut back production, but they also don't build. Let's go back to the last 8 years that we're growing. All this capital flowed in. What happened? All these construction people moved to town, and they buy things, and so they need houses, and it was not a sustainable organic growth. And it was very straightforward. As soon as the mines stop expanding, you're going to see that it's done. Now, the housing market corrected itself, but our economy didn't crash. No. It's bigger than it was. This is phenomenal. Our tax base is bigger. Our province is going to get more tax revenue than it did 10 years ago. But your question, what happens going forward? You know, we're going to have little blips of construction as certain commodities bounce back, like uranium, and we'll see more construction, and that'll be good. But it won't be like what we saw. That was very rapid growth. So all my clients are basically planning for business as usual, but how do they get their share of that pie? How do they basically build relationships with existing clients and then step out of the province and look at other opportunities in the States, or you know, who knows what's going to happen with the States, but in the States and then other provinces as well.
It was kind of the perfect storm back then too, because we had potash, all these companies that are exporting materials out, and our dollar was so strong for such a long time. So it was like this double whammy of our dollar being strong, exports doing well, and then it kind of all lightened up. And I mean, good news, just continue what you're saying about we don't get when a big company comes in. It trickles down, but it also trickles down to smaller businesses that all of a sudden see a big company, and then there must be some confidence. There must be a reason, like Ford Motor Products in the States, they just announced that they're not going to Mexico. They're actually going to put all that money into Michigan. That's a great thing for the United States, but it's also a great thing for all the little entrepreneurs in Michigan.
There's other opportunities here. We'll talk about the industrial sector real quick. I won't spend too much time on this because not everyone's from that sector, but if you go back 10 years, a lot of our mining suppliers had handshake arrangements with the mines. So basically, the mines would call up our mining suppliers when they couldn't solve a problem. And the mining suppliers, the fabricators, would walk in, and they usually knew the mine inside and out, and they'd help fix it, help figure out what the problem was. And then when there needed to be some work, they'd get a sole source purchase order. And it was a wonderful working relationship. They were codependent. And then BHP came in, and some other multinational mining companies, and so all of our existing mines decided that they were going to handle procurement the way the rest of the mining community around the world handles procurement, which is not relationship-based. And so our mining suppliers had to figure out how to change their sales and marketing process. And they did. And they're, first off, world-class in their quality and service. And then our supplier base figured out how to do business the way the rest of the mining companies do business. And now a lot of them are exporting. They're doing wonderful work abroad. And you know, not just in the mines, in the oil and gas sector and in other industrial. So, I mean, there's been a real benefit to the sophistication of our business community. And that's not just the industrial, like everybody's competitive environment has changed because we got on the radar. And you know, I don't care if you're in the restaurant industry or you know, heating and cooling industry, there's other competitors that are in town that wasn't before, and that's good for us. We've got a highly skilled entrepreneurial base here.
Your journey is a lot different than I thought it was going to be, traveling so much, growing your business, the different industries. So just want to say thanks. That's great to hear from you.
Thank you, Evan.
Thanks for coming. Really appreciate it.